I did get an opportunity to look around Greensboro today, thanks to my good friend Terrence. Showed me North Carolina A&T, which is very, very, yes, it was beautiful campus, beautiful campus. And I learned it was the largest HBCU, so it's amazing. This is my first time here, and the best. Okay, I got you. Well, it is not, unfortunately, a good occasion that we had to reconnect because there was unfortunately another murder on March 24th in Dayton, Ohio, under the leadership of Chief Afzal. And that is how Racial Justice Now, which was founded in Dayton in 2011, that is how we got activated and then got started in organizing to push back on that, particularly after we looked at the body cam video that was released to the media, and the community was instantly like, this is just not right, and we have to fight back and push back on these unjust stops. I want to honor the local organizers on the ground in Dayton and name my colleagues: Carlos Buford, who is the founder of Black Lives Matter Dayton; Sabrina Jordan, who is a directly impacted mother. Her son was murdered by Marine police, and she is the founder and president of Ohio Communities United Against Police Brutality. And so if you all have been paying attention to the media out of Dayton, all of those leaders have stood toe-to-toe with me, directly with me, to call for our own justice. And so I said to Reverend John Wright earlier, I said, no, that was the other brother. I said, I apologize because I believe the transparency process, that might have been because we were making so much noise in the city. And he was like, wait, hold on, I'm out of here. I had no idea he was in the process of looking for another job. We had no idea he was in the process of looking for a job in Greensboro. But after our press conference, this is facts, he announced the very next day that he was leaving. This man was killed March 24th, community. It has not been investigated. And he's leaving town. And so the community there is certainly, continuing to be upset about it, and we're continuing to call for justice. We wanted to have him fired, of course, and then, of course, he announced he was leaving. But the community there is continuing to organize around our city manager and the assistant city manager on top of that as well. Because of the way the city charter is, the city manager has the power currently, and we currently do not have 3 votes on the city council to push that. So that's the main thing that's happening now in terms of the organizing that's happening in Dayton. We're continuing to do our own due diligence. I even asked for a copy of the slides that you all just did to continue to make the case there in the city. And so again, I'm honored to be here. I understand and completely agree with the calls to rescind the offer. You all do not want this chief in this community. And I would have to say, after I looked at the demographics and have looked at this beautiful room of people here, I am honestly afraid that, with the leadership that he's had in Dayton and coming to a community that has a higher demographic of African Americans, that this could not bode well for your community if this decision stays.
Just before we open it up for questions from the audience, can you give us a little bit more context around what local city leaders and organizers in Dayton, what their experience is? Is this a chief that has that brings community policing with him on all sides of the community?
The short answer is no. Not according to local organizers in Dayton. When we talked about, in fact, if you go back and look at the comments, even on Facebook, people were like, "Good riddance, bye, great, get out of here." So that should be the answer about whether he was good at community policing. And I would say primarily the African American community was certainly not happy, with his leadership being there from 2021 until now.
There's a lot of conversation and rhetoric around the death of Mr. Reginald Thomas.
Yes.
Want to uplift his name because
Yes, and we're calling for justice for Reginald Thomas. He should not be dead.
He should not be dead.
Say his name.
Reginald Thomas.
Reginald Thomas.
And if there are members of his family watching you are in our prayers.
You're in our prayers.
We are supporting the dignity of his life here.
That's right.
Mr. Thomas was shot after a police encounter, a police stop.
Broken windows policing, a pretext stop. He was literally on a bike minding his business. No one called the police on him, you all.
A motorcycle?
No, a bike. It was literally a bike, not a motorcycle.
The kind that you pedal?
No, the kind that you pedal, seriously. Because that was the issue, was a bike light. Motorcycles have lights. But I'm just saying,
I just wanted to be clear.
No, I'm being clear. It was literally a bike. And
what you all call pretextual stops, we call here regulatory stops.
Regulatory, yeah, okay.
And so
the
just
language
to be
is
clear,
different.
so
yeah,
that
so
everybody
regulatory
will know,
stops. Yeah.
Mr. Thomas's bicycle did not have a light on it.
And let me address the gun. I'm not sure what the laws are in the state of North Carolina.
Well, I was going to get there.
In
so
Ohio,
let me make sure they
the
understand.
gun. Okay, I want to make sure.
He was stopped on the bike.
Right.
And this was not his first time being stopped.
That's right.
By the Dayton police.
Being harassed.
Was it 1 or 2 weeks prior?
Just 1 week prior. According to his family, 1 week prior, he was stopped again downtown by the police being harassed.
And so, because of the trauma of the previous harassment,
that's right.
Mr. Thomas asked the police,
that's right.
Can I just show you my ID?
You can see it on video.
I'm not committing any crimes. They're not stopping him because he's committing a crime. They are stopping him because he didn't have a light on his bike. And when that interaction wasn't de-escalated, and I heard my city manager respectfully recently share that this particular police hire was going to be a great fit for our community. I heard the police hire share in an interview last week that his office was responsible for de-escalation in their community. Because that stop wasn't de-escalated, Mr. Thomas pulled out his gun and pointed towards police? No. Mr. Thomas took off running on foot. Mind you,
away from the police.
Away from
the police, not towards them.
Mind you, he hasn't committed a crime. He just doesn't have a light. And he was willing to identify himself.
He was trying to give the ID.
Mr. Thomas took off on foot. We do understand that there are some mental issues at play. Mr. Thomas was also a houseless individual.
Yes.
So this was his primary mode of transportation, and downtown was his home.
And downtown was his home.
Mr. Thomas ran from the police, and when he was scuffled down, the gun fell out. Now, you were going to explain why the gun should not be an issue.
Right. Because the initial conversations, and I think most people kind of just defer, oh, well, if he had a gun, then, just automatic. And it's like, well, no, black people have Second Amendment rights as well. And, and he had the gun for protection because he's a houseless person. And he did not pull the gun on the police at all. He was running. Like, he wasn't there to hurt the police. He just wanted to be left alone. He wanted to just go about his business and live. And so what I wanted to make clear is that Ohio is an open carry state. Like, you can have a gun. It doesn't even have to, it's...
No license.
Yes. Alabama's the same way. So I'm like, it's not the gun. And I want us, like, in the audience and just in the regular community, like, having guns in the United States of America in and of itself is not criminal. Even for black men, having guns in and of itself is not criminal. There are Second Amendment rights.
Right. And it's important It's important, Jason, Gene, CJ, it's important for us to educate our community
Yes.
around the fair policing around guns, because the moment you hear that a black man was shot by police, but he had a gun,
Yeah, we just think, oh, well.
we
It's like,
automatically
no.
think, well, you're responsible for your own death.
Right.
And let me tell you, the narrative out of the Dayton Police Department under
That was
Chief
the narrative.
Afzal's leadership
That was
is
the
that
narrative.
he is responsible for his own death. I want to remind this community, I want to remind everybody watching us from beyond this community, they also said George Floyd was responsible for his own death.
That's right.
The police came out with a statement. The police in Louisville, Kentucky also said that Breonna Taylor was responsible for her own death, sleeping while black.
Right.
I want to remind you that public safety officers stood behind the killing of Trayvon Martin, saying that he was responsible for his own death.
Yeah.
Ahmaud Arbery, also responsible for his own death. And so we have to be careful listening to the narrative of law enforcement that by data proof target black and brown people, citizens, at a disproportionate rate, and then blaming them for being responsible for their own deaths.
And just one final moment on that. One of the things, and I'm glad you brought out Reginald Thomas's, economic situation, his current living situation. For me, this is a continued spectrum of the dehumanization of our black men and boys. We see it in the school to prison pipeline, which is how my organization got started. It literally starts in toddlerhood, as babies, when our children are targeted. But particularly for our boys and our men, the state violence that is targeting towards them when it comes to schools and the school to prison pipeline, when it comes to policing, and certainly we know what happens in court systems. Black men have the highest exoneration rates. I also want to, remind people of that as well. So for me, in the work that we're doing, we are focusing on disrupting that dehumanization narrative and the dehumanization pipeline from birth to death for black men and boys. Thank you.
The police department also said that Marcus Dion Smith was responsible for his own death as well.
Right here in Greensboro, North Carolina. But we know they settled that lawsuit because, in fact, he was not responsible for his own death. Marcus Smith, say his name.
Marcus Smith.
We are joined, one more presenter, and then we're going to turn it over to you all for comments and questions.